The lobby of Warren Tech had never been so quiet. It was nearly 11 at night when the little girl burst through the service door, white dress torn, bare feet slapping against the marble floor. A security guard spun around. 2 employees looked up from their phones. The nanny stumbled in behind her, one hand pressed to her ear, voice cracking. But 6-year-old Leah ran past every single one of them. She ran straight to the far corner of the lobby, where a man in a gray uniform was pushing a mop across the floor in slow, even strokes. Her small hands grabbed fistfuls of his shirt. "Mr. Daniel, please," she sobbed. "They hurt my mom. She won't wake up." The man looked down at her. His face showed nothing at first, weathered, still like a wall. Then something shifted behind his eyes. Something cold, something focused, something that had been locked away for a very long time. He set down his mop. "Show me where. Before we go any further, if you believe the most dangerous person in any room isn't always the one wearing the expensive suit, hit like, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and subscribe, because what this quiet, invisible man does in the next 4 minutes is going to change everything you thought you knew about him." Daniel Carter had been invisible for 3 years. Every morning at 5, he arrived through the service entrance on the east side of the building, swiped his time card, and disappeared into the corridors that the executives of Warren Tech never walked. He cleaned bathrooms on floors 2 through 7. He emptied trash cans. He scrubbed coffee rings off counters while employees talked around him the way people talk around furniture, without thinking, without seeing. At 39, he looked older than his years. Gray had come early to his temples. The lines around his eyes were carved deeper than they should have been, and his hands, always moving, always efficient, were laced with scars no one ever thought to ask about. He never made eye contact in the hallways, never lingered near the elevator banks, never stayed in one place long enough for anyone to form a clear picture of him. Management valued his silence and his reliability. He was, in the truest sense of the word, forgettable. He lived in a basement apartment 6 blocks east of the building. The ceiling leaked when it rained. The heating unit barely kept up with Chicago winters. He owned almost nothing: a narrow bed, a small table, 2 mismatched chairs, a hot plate. On the scratched dresser sat a single framed photograph, placed face down. He had not turned it over in 2 years. Most evenings, after his shift, he walked 14 blocks south to a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods. He taught basic first aid to whoever showed up, street kids mostly, elderly residents with nowhere else to go. He showed them how to clean wounds, how to recognize shock, how to perform chest compressions. He was patient and precise. He never told any of them that he used to be a doctor. He never told anyone. Leah Warren found him on a Thursday evening in October, 6 weeks before everything changed. She was supposed to be in ballet practice on the 4th floor, but she had slipped away and ridden the elevator to the basement, drawn by a curiosity she couldn't name. She found Daniel in the corridor outside the supply room, replacing a fluorescent bulb. "Mr. Daniel," she called out, her voice bouncing off the concrete walls. He looked at her and shook his head slowly. But there was something at the corner of his mouth, not quite a smile, but close enough. She sat on an overturned plastic bucket and talked while he worked. She told him about her school, about the book she was reading, about a girl in her class named Priya who was sometimes nice and sometimes wasn't. She told him things she didn't tell her mother about feeling lonely in the big office where she spent so many evenings waiting, about missing her father even though he never called anymore, about the way her stomach went tight when her mother worked past 10 and the lobby got quiet and dark. Daniel listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't offer advice she hadn't asked for. Sometimes he would teach her something small: how to tie a bowline knot, how to tell if an apple was ripe, how to whistle through 2 fingers the way his grandfather had once taught him. Leah practiced the whistle for 20 minutes and still couldn't get it right, and both of them laughed, and the sound of it filled the basement corridor like something that had always belonged there. The other employees noticed and lowered their voices about it. A few thought it strange that the CEO's daughter spent her evenings with the janitor. Cecilia Warren had seen them once, through the glass panel beside the stairwell door. She had watched her daughter on the upturned bucket, hands moving the way they always moved when Leah loved a story, and then walked on. She didn't stop it. There was something in Daniel's stillness that she trusted without knowing why. Cecilia Warren had been running this company for 3 years, and in that time she had learned to trust very little and verify everything. She had taken over Warren Tech the month after her father's funeral, stepping in at 31 with no transition period and no margin for hesitation. Her father had built the company from a 2-person consultancy into a mid-size enterprise solutions firm. She had inherited both the business and its hidden problems. She worked 16-hour days, flew to 3 cities in a week, negotiated contracts worth millions while Leah colored pictures at the corner desk in her office. She had divorced Leah's father years before, a man who had wanted something decorative, not something real, and she had not looked back. But for 3 months, something had been wrong. The quarterly numbers didn't add up. Not dramatically, not enough to trigger an audit flag, but enough that she noticed. Money moving through accounts that shouldn't have been active, vendor payments to companies she didn't recognize, authorization codes matching her CFO's credentials. Richard Brennan had been her father's closest friend for over 2 decades. When she laid the spreadsheet in front of him, he had smiled with steady, paternal calm and told her it was standard. She had said she'd like someone to walk her through it. He had never sent anyone. She stopped trusting him that afternoon. She started building her own file. It was on a Tuesday evening that she stepped into the wrong elevator. She had been working late, reviewing vendor contracts, and had taken a wrong turn in the East Corridor, ending up at the service elevator instead of the executive bank. The car dropped 2 feet and stopped between floors with a grinding shudder. She hit the emergency button. A recorded voice told her assistance was on the way. She stood in the small fluorescent-lit box with her spreadsheet still in her hand, and she thought about Leah upstairs, and about Brennan, and about the meeting she had scheduled for tomorrow that he would find a way to redirect. And she said out loud, "To no one, do you ever feel like your own building is trying to swallow you?" A voice came from outside the doors. Quiet, level. "Buildings don't swallow people. People do." She went still. A pause. Then, "I can get the manual release, but I need 4 minutes and someone from engineering to reset the panel. Don't try to pry the doors." I wasn't going to. Most people try. When the doors finally opened and she stepped out, she looked at him directly for the first time, really looked. He was already turning back to his cart. She walked away without saying thank you, and she thought about it afterward and couldn't explain why she hadn't. What she could explain was that those 3 words, "buildings don't swallow people. People do," had loosened something in her chest she hadn't known was clenched. It stayed with her for days. She also noticed, from that point on, that Leah always came back from the basement lighter. Brennan discovered she was building a case against him through someone in her own finance department, a source she hadn't identified. He didn't confront her. Men like Brennan didn't confront. They maneuvered. By Thursday morning, he had put everything in place. The evening was chosen deliberately. Cecilia always worked late on Thursdays. Leah was always in the lobby with Mrs. Chen, and the parking garage on sublevel 2 had 2 blind spots in the camera coverage that his people had mapped months ago, just in case. The afternoon before it happened, Leah came down to the basement for the 4th time that week. She set a tin of cookies on the supply cart, chocolate chip, slightly overdone around the edges. "Mom made too many," she announced. They sat in their usual quiet while Daniel sorted through a bin of replacement fittings. Then Leah looked at him with the direct, unguarded attention of a child who hasn't learned that some questions are intrusive. "Do you have a little girl?" she asked. Daniel's hands went still. He didn't answer right away. The fluorescent light hummed. From above, the building settled against the wind with a low creak. Leah waited. She was good at waiting, she had learned it here, from him. "I did," he said finally. The words came from a place he kept sealed. He had no daughter. It was Emily. He was thinking of Emily, his wife, who had been so openly brave in the way that children are brave, without calculation. Emily Carter, registered nurse, who had worked beside him every day at the forward operating base outside Kandahar, in the low cinder block building they called a hospital, though it was barely that. They had argued that morning. She had wanted to go with the medical supply convoy heading north to the village clinic. He had said the route was too exposed, the intelligence 3 days old. She had said that was exactly why the clinic needed the supplies. He had a surgery he couldn't cancel. So, in the end, he had let her go. 6 hours later, the convoy hit an improvised explosive device on the return route. Daniel had worked 18 straight hours on the casualties they brought back. He had saved 11 people. His hands had not shaken. There was no time for shaking. Emily had died on impact. There had been nothing to save. He received his honorable discharge 4 months later, returned to the United States, and let his medical license lapse quietly over the course of a single administrative cycle. He found jobs where he could be nobody, where failing was not a possibility because nothing he did truly mattered. He had been looking for that, a life with no stakes, a place where the worst he could do was leave a streak on a window. "I'm sorry, Mr. Daniel," Laya said. She didn't ask more. She seemed to understand, the way children sometimes do, that comprehending a fraction of something is more respectful than demanding the whole. Daniel looked at her, this small, serious girl who had chosen a basement corridor over a lobby full of adults, and felt the ache of recognizing what you have lost in the shape of what remains. He handed her another cookie. She took it. Thursday night arrived, the way bad nights always do, ordinary until it wasn't. Cecilia was still at her desk at 10:15, the office dark except for her lamp. The file was complete. 3 months of work, shell company registrations, wire transfer records, authorization logs, email communications from an account Brennan thought was clean. $17 million, moved methodically over 22 months. His signature on every critical approval. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 the next morning. She texted Mrs. Chen. "Coming down now. 5 minutes." In the lobby playroom, Laya was sitting cross-legged with a book open in her lap, though she wasn't really reading anymore. She was listening for the elevator. The parking garage on sublevel 2 was quiet at that hour. Flat yellow light pooled in the center of each bay and left the edges dark. Cecilia's heels struck the concrete in clean, rhythmic clicks as she crossed toward her car. She was thinking about the morning, about Brennan's face when she walked in with the evidence printed and bound. She didn't hear them coming. 2 men emerged from behind a panel van near the stairwell ski masks, moving fast. She turned and tried to step back, and one caught her arm and yanked her sideways. Her briefcase flew, papers scattered across the floor in a wide fan. "Where are the files?" A voice she almost recognized through the mask, flat, controlled, familiar in its cadence. A fist drove into her midsection. The air left her entirely. The second man grabbed her by the shoulders and shoved her hard into the concrete pillar. Her skull connected with the edge, and the world went white, then dim, then strange and far away. She heard the question again. She heard one of them say someone was coming. Footsteps. A door. An engine. Then silence complete and cold, and the floor pressed against her cheek, and one thought, faint and stubborn. Laya was upstairs. She had to stay. "Upstairs, Mrs." Chen checked her watch at 10:40. 15 minutes since the text, she called. No answer. The ventilation shaft for the parking level ran behind the wall of the playroom's far corner. Laya had discovered this her second week of waiting for Mom evenings. That night she heard something different, something that she felt before she understood it. She was out of the playroom and down the service stairs before Mrs. Chen had finished her third call. She pushed through the heavy door to sublevel 2. Her mother was on the floor between the pillar and the elevator bay, one arm bent wrong, papers scattered around her like torn pages. Mrs. Chen was already kneeling, pressing fingers to the side of Cecilia's neck, hands trembling. Laya stood in the doorway and looked at her mother for one long, still second. Then she turned and ran. Not toward the exit. Not toward the security desk. Straight to the service elevator, up to the ground floor, across the lobby at a full sprint, to the far corner, where the yellow light of the janitorial station glowed against the marble, and a man in a gray uniform was emptying a trash receptacle near the main doors. Her hands grabbed his shirt. "Mr. Daniel, please." Her voice broke on every word. "They hurt my mom. She's down there and she won't wake up." Daniel dropped to one knee in front of her. His hands came to rest on her shoulders, steady, no tremor. "Slow down. Where is she?" "Garage. Sublevel 2. Mrs. Chen is with her, but..." The security guard had appeared at Daniel's shoulder. "I already called 911, about 6 minutes out." Daniel stood. His voice had changed, not louder, not harder, but stripped of everything that wasn't information. 6 minutes can be too long. He looked at Laya. "Take me there right now." She took his hand and pulled him toward the elevator. In the 30 seconds it took to reach the garage level, something happened inside Daniel Carter that he had spent 3 years trying to prevent. The part of his mind he had sealed and buried and built a quiet, invisible life on top of the part that calculated and assessed and triaged came back online, not slowly, all at once, like a circuit breaker thrown in reverse. The doors opened. He was across the garage in 4 strides. He checked her airway clear. He lifted her eyelids, left pupil reactive, right slightly dilated, concerning but not catastrophic. 2 fingers to her neck, rapid and thin, 110 beats per minute, the body compensating for blood loss. He pressed lightly on her abdomen and felt the rigidity that went deeper than muscle guarding. Internal bleeding. Not immediately fatal, but the clock was running. Left arm, midshaft fracture, bone intact, scalp laceration above the right ear deep, bleeding steadily, manageable. He reached under his uniform collar and unzipped the worn canvas bag strapped across his chest. Mrs. Chen made a small, helpless sound. The bag had been there every day for 3 years, under his gray jacket, and no one had ever asked about it. Inside, sealed hemostatic gauze, a collapsible cervical collar in its original military packaging, surgical tape, compression bandages, a compact trauma kit that any experienced paramedic would identify immediately as battlefield medicine. "Call 911 back," he told Mrs. Chen without looking up. "Tell them, unconscious trauma victim, head injury with possible intracranial involvement, suspected internal abdominal bleeding, fractured humerus. Trauma team ready on arrival." She stared at him. "You're the janitor. Make the call." She made it. He heard her reading back his words. He heard the dispatcher pause and ask, "Is there a medical professional on scene?" Daniel packed the scalp wound with hemostatic gauze and fitted the cervical collar. Laya appeared at his side. He had not told her to come closer. She had come on her own. "Laya," he said, "kneel beside her and hold her hand. Talk to her. Tell her you're here." Laya knelt. She took her mother's hand in both of hers. "Mom," she said very quietly, very steadily. "It's me. Mr. Daniel is here. He's going to help you." Daniel worked for 4 minutes and 11 seconds before the paramedics came through the stairwell door. He splinted the arm. He positioned Cecilia on her side, airway protected, and covered her with his uniform jacket to slow the onset of shock. Every movement was the product of years and years of training, of procedures drilled into reflex, of hands that had learned this work in conditions far worse than a quiet parking garage. His hands remembered. Even after everything, they remembered. The lead paramedic was a woman in her 40s who assessed Daniel's interventions in rapid sequence cervical collar, packed wound, splint, positioning, and her expression shifted from assessment to something that was not quite surprise but close to it. "Who did first response?" "I did," Daniel said, stepping back. She looked at his gray uniform, at the canvas bag beside him. "Military," she said. It was not a question. He didn't answer. As they moved the stretcher toward the elevator, the paramedic said to her partner, clearly enough to carry. Whoever did the first response just saved her life. Laya was standing beside Daniel, her small hand wrapped around his sleeve. He put his hand on her shoulder. "She's breathing," he said. "I've got her." The detectives came the next morning. Daniel reported to his shift at 5 as he always did. He gave them what they needed. His name, an account of the evening, a description of the injuries and the interventions. He was accurate, minimal, and without elaboration. He did not wait to learn what the fingerprint check would find. Cecilia woke in a hospital room at 2 in the afternoon. Her arm was in a cast, her ribs ached with each breath. Laya was asleep in the chair beside the bed, one hand loosely holding hers across the rail. Mrs. Chen was standing near the window, and her face, when she saw Cecilia move, collapsed into relief. "Mr. Daniel saved you," Laya said when she woke, sitting up immediately and taking both her mother's hands. "He had all these medical things, and he knew exactly what to do. The ambulance people said you would have died." A pause. "I went to get him. I ran and I got him." "You did exactly right," Cecilia said. "You did exactly right." Detective Morris arrived at 4. He took her account methodically, the documents, Brennan, the embezzlement, Marcus Holloway's voice through the ski mask. Then he turned a page in his notebook about Daniel Carter. We ran his fingerprints from the scene. He waited for the right beat, and then he told her. Captain Daniel Carter, United States Army Medical Corps. 3 combat deployments. Decorated trauma surgeon. 27 confirmed saves under fire. Honorable discharge 8 years ago. Then, nothing, no medical practice, no hospital affiliation, no forwarding address until he surfaced here as a maintenance worker 3 years ago. The room went quiet. Cecilia stared at the ceiling. She thought about the man who had answered every question in the same measured, uninflected way. About his voice reading triage criteria back to a dispatcher, the way trained people speak, not calm with effort, but calm as a matter of fact. About her daughter's voice in that parking garage, steady and clear, because he had told her to be and she trusted him absolutely. "Why?" she said softly. "That's what I'd like to understand," Morris said. "He told us he'd come in for a full statement this morning. He hasn't come in yet." He closed his notebook. "I thought you'd want to know before the news got there first." After he left, Laya climbed carefully onto the edge of the bed and curled against Cecilia's good side, and they lay in quiet for a while. "Did Mr. Daniel ever tell you he was a doctor?" Cecilia asked. "No. He just said he likes to help people." Laya thought about it. "He also tried to teach me to whistle, but he couldn't do it either. I think he was just pretending so I wouldn't feel bad." Cecilia pressed her lips to the top of her daughter's head. "Is he in trouble?" "No, baby. He's not in trouble." She held her closer. "He saved my life," but she was already working out where he would be. 2 days later, against her doctor's recommendation, Cecilia Warren left the hospital. Her arm was in a cast. Her ribs made each breath deliberate. She moved with the careful slowness of someone who has been reminded that the body has limits. She signed the discharge paperwork, called her driver, and gave him an address on the south side. Holloway and his associate had been arrested at O'Hare, trying to board separate flights. Under interrogation, Holloway had given the investigators everything Brennan's instructions, the timeline, the payments, the account routed through a Delaware holding company. The FBI had executed simultaneous search warrants on Brennan's home and office. He had been arrested at his weekend property in the Hamptons that morning, processed by noon, and bailed out by 2. The board meeting was still necessary. Brennan still held his seat. He would be there. Cecilia found Daniel at the community center on Ardmore, in a room that smelled of old wood and antiseptic. He was showing 2 teenage boys in oversized hoodies how to apply a pressure bandage. His movements were patient and exact. He corrected one boy's technique without making him feel stupid about it, which was, she noted, a specific skill that most people didn't possess. When she appeared in the doorway, he glanced up. His expression was not surprised. It was resigned. "You should still be in the hospital," he said. "You saved my life," she said. Her voice caught on the second word. "I needed to say it to your face." He sent the boys to keep practicing and walked to the far side of the room. She followed. She told him she knew about Emily. He went, still then, into a different kind of stillness, braced, the way a person goes still before something hits them. Then it shifted into anger, and the anger was real and unguarded in a way that none of his expressions had ever been. "You had no right," he said. "You saved my life. I wanted to understand who you are. What you found isn't who I am. It's who I was. I think it's both." He looked away. From somewhere outside, a bus passed. The two boys kept working, pretending not to listen. "I'm sorry," Cecilia said. "I'm so sorry about her." The words reached him somewhere below the anger. She watched his shoulders drop, almost imperceptibly. He sat down on a folding chair, leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and stared at the floor. "We argued that morning," he said. His voice was flat, hollowed out. "She wanted to go on the convoy to the village clinic. I told her the route was too exposed. She said that was why they needed the supplies. I had a surgery I couldn't leave." He paused. "So I let her go." Cecilia sat beside him without speaking. "I worked 18 hours on the casualties they brought back. Saved 11 people." He stopped. Emily was already gone. She died on impact. Nothing could have been done, even if I'd been there. I know that. I've known it for 8 years. He looked up. "It doesn't change anything. So you stopped being a doctor." "I stopped pretending I deserved to be one." A pause. "Then your daughter grabbed my hand." He was quiet. "I couldn't let her feel what I felt. I couldn't let her lose her mother when there was something I could do." Cecilia didn't answer right away. They sat in the folding chairs in the empty room and didn't try to fill the silence. And outside, the city continued, indifferent and ongoing. And for a little while, that was enough. "I still need you at that board meeting tomorrow," she finally said. He looked at her. "I'm a janitor. Right now, I need someone I trust in that room. Everyone else in that building could be compromised, and I don't know who Brennan has reached." She met his eyes. "You're the only person I know who has absolutely nothing to gain from lying to me." A long silence. "What do you need?" he said. He arrived at Warren Tech the next morning in a dark suit he had kept folded in a garment bag at the back of his closet for 8 years. It fit well enough. Several employees who had seen him every day for 3 years passed him in the lobby without recognition, which didn't surprise him. The meeting was called for 9. Daniel positioned himself in the hallway outside the 20th floor conference room, where he could see through the glass wall without being easily seen. 8 board members arrived between 8:45 and 8:58. Cecilia arrived at 8:50, moving carefully, her cast visible beneath her jacket sleeve. Elizabeth Morrison came in last and took the far end of the table, her expression composed and watchful. At 8:58, Richard Brennan walked in, silver-haired, charcoal suit, the easy bearing of a man accustomed to being trusted in every room. He went directly to Cecilia and extended his hand. "Cecilia, thank God you're all right." She didn't take it. "Sit down, Richard." Something moved through his face and was gone. Cecilia presented the evidence without drama. The spreadsheets, the shell company registrations, the authorization records, the wire transfers. Board members leaned in, then back, then looked at one another and then at Brennan. He denied everything calmly, with the measured concern of a man watching a colleague come unraveled. "Cecilia, you suffered a serious head injury. No one here would hold it against you if..." "Marcus Holloway gave a full statement to federal investigators," Cecilia said. "He and his associate are cooperating in exchange for reduced charges. The FBI has documentation linking you to each transaction found during the search of your home and office." She paused. A grand jury indicted you this morning, Richard. Embezzlement, conspiracy, money laundering, and attempted murder. The room went very quiet. Brennan's face showed what was underneath for one brief, unguarded moment. Then, the mask came back down, rigid now, where it had been natural. He moved around the table toward her, fast and purposeful. Every person in the room froze. Daniel came through the door. He had been reading Brennan's posture for 4 minutes, the set of his shoulders, the way his hands had gone flat on the table, the particular quality of stillness that precedes movement in a man who has run out of options. When Brennan stood and turned, Daniel was already moving. He stepped through the conference room door and placed himself between Brennan and Cecilia before anyone had time to react. "Step back," Daniel said. One sentence, quiet as a door closing. Brennan stared at the man in the ordinary dark suit. "Who the hell are you? Someone who knows exactly what you're capable of. And someone who won't let you hurt her again." The FBI agents came in 30 seconds later, 4 of them, badges displayed, already crossing the room. They had been in the building since 8:30, at Elizabeth Morrison's quiet request. One of them read Brennan his rights, while another placed the handcuffs. Brennan looked at Cecilia as they turned him toward the door. His face had abandoned all performance now. What was underneath was smaller and colder than what he had spent 20 years showing the world. "You'll never survive this company without me. You're not half the CEO your father was." Daniel spoke before Cecilia could. "She survived you trying to kill her," he said quietly. "That's stronger than you'll ever be." They led Brennan out. The room was still. Elizabeth Morrison found her voice first and looked at Daniel. "Who is this man?" For the first time in 3 years, Daniel answered the question honestly. "My name is Daniel Carter. I work here as a janitor. I'm also a doctor. I'm the one who treated Miss Warren after the attack." The revelation moved through the room like a current. Someone murmured. Someone else reached for their phone. Daniel met their stares without flinching. He had spent 3 years making himself invisible. He was still deciding what he wanted to be instead. In the weeks that followed, the company underwent the restructuring Cecilia had been planning since the first month she suspected Brennan board resignations. A full audit, Elizabeth Morrison appointed interim CFO with a mandate to rebuild from the ground up. Daniel continued to report for his maintenance shifts. The company hadn't asked him to leave. He hadn't asked to leave. Employees who had seen him every day for 3 years now nodded as they passed him, which was strange, and which he was slowly learning to accept. Cecilia found him 3 weeks after the board meeting at the community center on Ardmore on a Tuesday evening. She had been turning something over in her mind and needed to say it to his face. She said it plainly. A community health center. Free care for people who couldn't access it otherwise. Trauma response, primary care, mental health services, real infrastructure, real funding. She wanted him to run it. He said no immediately. His license had lapsed. He hadn't practiced in close to a decade. "You stabilized a patient with internal injuries and a traumatic brain injury in a parking garage with a field kit," she said. "You've been training at-risk young people in emergency response for 3 years in a building with no heat. You are already doing this work. I'm offering you the resources to do it the way it deserves to be done." Every time he thought about practicing medicine again, he said, he saw Emily's face. Cecilia was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're not supposed to stop seeing her face. You're supposed to honor it." Emily was a nurse who volunteered for a convoy because she believed the people at that clinic were worth the risk. The best way to honor that belief is to keep living it. She paused. "You don't have to be the surgeon you were before. You just have to decide whether guilt is going to have the last word, or purpose is." Daniel looked at the wall. He thought about Emily not as the absence she had left, but as the presence she had been. The certainty of her. The uncalculating courage. If she were here, he knew, she would not be gentle about this. She would have said it months ago, directly, without ceremony. Before he could respond, the door flew open, and Laya appeared at a run, holding a piece of paper with both hands extended. "Mr. Daniel, look," she announced. "I made this for your new hospital." It was a crayon drawing on construction paper. In the center stood a figure in a blue-white coat with a stethoscope 3 times too large around its neck. Around it, dozens of stick figures in every color Leia apparently owned. Above the building, she had drawn a red cross and printed in careful capitals, "Dr. Daniel's Hospital, where everyone gets help." In the lower right corner, slightly smaller, was a figure in a white uniform with wings. "That's your wife," Leia said, with the matter-of-fact tenderness of someone delivering important information. "Mom told me about her. I thought she should be in the picture too, because she's watching you help people and she's proud of you." Daniel held the drawing. The light hummed overhead. Leia watched him with her dark, patient eyes. Cecilia stood to his left and didn't say anything, because there was nothing useful she could add. "This is the best gift anyone has ever given me," Daniel said. Leia beamed. "So you'll do it?" He looked at the small, winged figure in the corner of the drawing, at the dozens of surrounding stick people, at the building with its red cross and its misspelled name. He thought about Emily's face, not frozen in grief but bright and direct and without self-deception, the way it had been in the ordinary hours of their life together. "Okay," he said quietly. "I'll do it." The Daniel Carter Community Health Center opened on a Saturday morning in early May, on a block that had not had accessible medical services in 11 years. The sky was clear, the air warm, the kind of spring day that makes people believe, briefly and sincerely, that things can be made better. They came because word had spread through the networks of the neighborhood, neighbor to neighbor, church to church, that there was now a place where you could get care without a copay, without waiting 3 months for an appointment, without the particular degradation of being treated as a problem rather than a person. They came with children and alone. They came carrying medication lists they couldn't afford to fill and diagnoses they had received and had nowhere to take. The first day, they saw 112 patients. Daniel moved through the center from room to room in his white coat, consulting with staff he had spent months selecting not by prestige, but by the quality of their concern, the kind that couldn't be performed for a job interview. He held the hand of a woman who was crying before she could say why she had come, and eventually she got there, and what she needed turned out to be manageable. He explained a diagnosis to a 15-year-old boy in plain and patient language, and watched the boy's face shift from terror to something closer to agency. He wrote a prescription for a veteran who had been rationing his medication for 8 months, who sat very still in the exam room and breathed in the careful way of someone who had been very close to an edge for a long time. This was what he had been made to do. He had known it once, and then he had tried very hard to forget it, and now he was remembering, and the remembering, unexpectedly, did not hurt the way he had been afraid it would. Late in the afternoon, Cecilia found him in the small office at the back of the building, writing up notes. She set a cup of coffee on the desk beside him and sat down across from him with her own. 112, she said. 112, he agreed. He set down his pen. Outside the closed door, the building was quieting the sounds of the last patients moving through. A child's voice, footsteps on the corridor floor. "You gave me a reason to stop hiding," he said. It came out plainly, without ceremony. "You showed me that moving forward doesn't erase what happened. It honors it." Cecilia looked at him across the desk. She thought about what the past year had built between them. Slowly, in the ordinary hours between crises, the shared lunches in the courtyard, the evening conversations that lasted longer than either of them planned, the particular ease of 2 people who have stopped pretending with each other. "I'm glad we're doing this together," she said. It meant more than it sounded like, and both of them knew it. Leia knocked on the open door with her knuckle, the way she had recently decided was the adult approach to interrupting. "Are you guys done? Because I want to show the whole building to Dr. Daniel before we go. Also, we're having dinner and nobody gets to say no." Daniel laughed the full, unguarded version. "All right," he said. "You're the boss." "I know," Leia said, and went back down the hallway at a run. 1 year later, on a Saturday evening in early May, the community center held its anniversary celebration. The staff came, board members came, patients who wanted to came not out of obligation, but out of the attachment that forms between people who have received real help and the place that gave it. Daniel stood at the front of the room beside a small wooden podium. He was wearing a shirt and tie, which Laya had insisted on and which he had accepted without much argument, because he was learning to concede the small things. "A year ago," he said, "I was a man who had given up on himself." His voice was steady but not easy. "I was living as small as I could manage, in as much silence as the world would allow. I thought I was keeping something safe. I wasn't. I was just afraid." He looked out at the room. "Then a 6-year-old girl ran to me in a lobby because she trusted me, and that trust was the most terrifying and most important thing that had happened to me in 8 years." He stepped away from the podium and walked to the front row where Cecilia and Laya were sitting side by side. He stopped in front of them and reached into his jacket pocket. The room understood what was happening before he fully began. He lowered himself to one knee, not in front of Cecilia, in front of Leia. He held out a small velvet box with a silver ring inside it. "Laya Warren," he said, "I would very much like your permission to ask your mother a question." Laya looked at the ring. She looked at him. Her expression was that of someone who has been waiting a long time and is choosing, against every instinct, to hold still for approximately 3 more seconds. "Yes," she said. "Ask her." Right now, Daniel stood. He turned to Cecilia, who was already crying the silent, helpless kind that means yes before the word. He opened a second box, smaller, with a single stone that caught the room's light. "You saved me before I saved you," he said. "You saw me when I had made myself invisible. You believed I was worth something when I had spent years trying to disprove it." His voice broke, and he let it. "You and your daughter gave me a family when I thought the word no longer applied to me. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I can't promise there won't be days when the past is heavy, but I promise I will show up, every day, for both of you." He looked at her. "Will you marry me?" Cecilia laughed through her tears, the startled, helpless kind that means yes before any word does. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Daniel." He put the ring on her finger. She pulled him to her, and then Laya launched herself from the chair into the space between them, and the 3 of them held on in the front row, while the room applauded around them, and none of them heard a word of it. They were already somewhere else in the part of the story that comes after the surviving is done, after the hiding is done, after the long, quiet work of learning to be present again has finally earned you a morning where the first thing you feel is not loss, but possibility. They were already there.